24th meeting of the Swanzey Planning Board here at Whitcomb Hall. Begin with the roll call. Scott Self here, Michael York.
Here.
Richard Lane.
Here.
Brandon Self.
Here.
Victoria Ames.
Here.
Mark Scalera.
Here.
Alternate Jane Johnson.
Here.
Alternate Stacy Goodell.
Here.
And Selectman's Rep James Tempesta.
Here.
Okay, we have a full board, so we will be seating no one or anyone. The agenda this evening is approval of the minutes of July 10th, 2025. There are no public hearings, and we just have discussions, other business, which is the Wetlands Conservation District discussion, and any other business as may be required. So we don't need a regional impact vote, so we can go right to the approval of the July 10th minutes. Anybody have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Mark to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Richard. Is there any further discussion, changes, or modifications? Then all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? And that moves us on to discussions. And that is the wetlands, changes in the wetlands district. Everybody had a chance to look it over, I'm assuming?
Could we invite the wetlands people to come up and talk to us?
They're right there. They can talk to us whenever they want.
Okay.
You want to sit at this table?
The main reason why I included this in the agenda is just so it's synthesized with all the changes we made at the joint meeting. So I hope you guys had a chance to read it over, give those comments before our next joint meeting. We can finalize those comments.
Yeah, and nothing has been sent to the attorney yet, right? Because we're waiting till we're done, because there's no sense having him read a bunch of stuff that is or is not going to be in there. So I'm paying him for that time.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see, the change was, first page on item F was a cross out, possible removal, needs consensus. So that's the main thing.
Before you get to there,
Yep,
C,
Richard C, yep.
we've just talked about that before. I think there's no need for that to be there.
I agree. I mean, yeah, I don't know really what that's, it's always been in there, but I just never understood what the heck it meant in there.
So I would say that we should, perhaps delete that.
To make it shorter, yeah.
I'd agree to that.
You would, well, you want to make it a motion then, Richard?
Make a motion that under purpose, letter C, that we remove that from the
Remove it.
definitions.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Michael York. Is there any further discussion? Board members?
Just want to point out that it's possible that if the wetlands are damaged in such a way that the town has to step in and provide resources to mitigate the damage, that could be an expense. So I think that's why that's in there. I don't know if it's necessary, Scott, but I think
Yeah.
that's why it's in there.
Because the town's going to have to pay for it whether that's in there or not, right?
Right,
I mean,
and
it has
so,
no reason, I mean.
And then the town could go after the polluter to
Well, they would.
get reimbursed,
They
yeah.
have to
Sure.
sue them for that.
It's
sure,
really not really
but
needed.
if it's
that might be
clear
why
what
it
you
was in
can't,
there.
if it's clear what you can't do, then it helps. That's,
Yeah.
I think that's the reasoning behind it. I'm not saying it has to stay, I'm just saying that's the reason.
Yeah, that might, probably the reason there. Anybody else?
Sorry, I missed the motion.
The motion was by Richard, and it was to eliminate item C under purpose, number 1. And there's number C, item C underneath that, just to keep it a little brief. Anybody else? Then all those in favor of eliminating item C, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, we can get rid of that. And are we getting rid of F as well to keep it shorter, or short as possible?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion by Michael York that we are eliminating F.
Second.
Seconded by Richard. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Oh, you have,
Just want to point out that the working group, the Conservation Commission, including Victoria, met last night, and we agree that F should be removed.
Okay.
I just want to also point out that by removing C, you're putting something on the warrant that wouldn't necessarily be there.
that's true.
Can I say something there, though? I think it would be as short as we want to keep the warrant, I also think it would be less confusing to people to see the entire ordinance on the warrant rather than pieces of the ordinance on the warrant like we did last time, since we're changing it so much. So I don't have a problem with
You know,
additional language on the ordinance, but.
it's probably not gonna happen. I mean, it's long enough without the entire ordinance on there.
Well, you've
But-
almost got, you're gonna have almost every section on there anyway, so to just leave one section out.
Well, we can think about that, because we haven't gone to public hearing yet. You know, this is just a preliminary
Right.
step.
Yep, and the
See what's
public
gonna
hearing might be enough information, you know, we might be able to put it all out in the public hearing and show
Yep.
people the whole ordinance then. So,
Yep.
it doesn't matter. I just wanted to really say that if we do something, remove what's already there, we are adding an article to the warrant.
Yep. So the motion is to remove item F under purpose A, purpose 1, and any further discussion?
You need a second?
Did we have, I thought Richard seconded.
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
the motion was by you, and
Aye.
Roger seconded it.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Then all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. The first one was seconded by Michael York, and the second motion was seconded by Richard
I'd
Dareswell.
like to mention that. Yeah,
Okay. So let's see, under district boundaries, and we have, I think we probably ought to have a wording change there. It's under B, district boundaries, and it says wetlands are defined as those areas of the town that are inundated, and it goes on to say, but we're talking about specific areas in Swanzey, not wetlands in general. So I think it should say, the Swanzey Wetlands Conservation District is defined as those areas of the town that are inundated or saturated, and on it goes.
can I add some, when we met last night, we looked at this and we revised it quite a bit. I'd like to let you know what we came up with.
Yeah, let's hear it.
One of the things we decided, because there were several things in our conversation we had in the joint meeting where we identified certain things that need to be defined, we suggest that we have a definition section like many ordinances do. And there's basically a page of definitions that, and one of which is wetlands. And if it's defined in the definitions, then we don't have to have this language about it being the first paragraph
So
that's
you're
there.
saying that number 1 would be deleted because
Well,
we'd have
Yeah, a new number 1 would read something differently. In fact, I only have one, it's only one thing, one there under district boundaries with parts A, B, C, D, E. And that's all that's needed there. If we define wetlands in a definition section, along with some other topics, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other things as well as wetlands, it reduces the verbiage that's part of the actual ordinance. And the wetlands, and where the definitions go, could either be in the wetlands ordinance, or it could be in the definitions at the back of the.
And you're probably going definitions, like every other definition is in there, but you're getting back to B, and paragraph number 1, that is or is not proposed to be in there by your group.
I've got to, if you give me a chance, I've got to look at what was originally there, because I've got too many documents here otherwise. But, so in B, we had numbers 1 and 2 and 3, and what I had done was I said 1 should read just the part here where it says, the Swanzey Wetlands Conservation District is sometimes referred to herein as wetlands or wetland areas. The Wetlands Conservation District includes but is not limited to. And so that really is number 2 there, what you have there.
Yep.
And then we list those things, A, B, C. We cut out a lot of C, if you remember right. We cut out a lot of C. So what it reads now is any freshwater wetland over 1,000 square feet, which includes marshes, swamps, bogs, and wooded bottomlands, and any surface waters, including rivers, streams, and intermittent streams, and the land under said waters. Determination of the boundaries between wetlands and uplands shall be made in accordance with methods outlined in the 1987 and the regional supplement. That's pretty much what's there. And then I added E, which was, I'm sorry, D. We left D pretty much as what we crossed off the adjacent municipality business. We talked about crossing that off before. And then I moved the buffer section up to letter E in this section because the buffers are part of the boundaries. I mean, the boundaries, it should be all under boundaries. So we don't need a separate number for that. It just becomes a letter. And we can talk about whether buffers or not are included, but that's, again, buffers are defined in the definitions, so we don't have to say what a buffer is in there. And that leaves us able to just say what the buffers are around the various pieces.
So we would be defining wetlands, vernal pools, buffers,
Bogs or
peatlands,
bogs.
those would all be in the definitions.
If I may, real quick, I think this conversation will go more smoothly if we had copies of this.
Right, we just met last night,
We met
so we
last
don't
night.
have the final language, we're just kind of giving a general idea, but I think to have them vote on the language in this section would be premature, because
Premature.
we're trying to come up with something better.
But what I'm trying to point out is that we did come up with a way to shorten this quite a bit.
All right, then we can skip over that part of it, whereas the district boundaries, that part, number one, where you guys have modified it until we see what you've modified, and we have a chance to go over that, so that'd be number 2 as well. And under buffers, I think we gotta nail down whether we're gonna go ahead with buffers or not. It's, it doesn't seem to be a very, very, very popular thing, the buffers around the wetlands, as far as, taking of property rights, so.
Can we step back to the district boundary, under the district boundaries, the wetlands?
Yep.
Because on our last get-together, vernal pools, we were looking for a definition
I
for
think those guys have probably
Would you
come
like,
up with a definition of it, right?
that.
One
There's one that I looked up, the state of Pennsylvania has a very good definition. And it's a temporary wetland that fill with water during spring times, or other times, but then disappear. And that's anything over 500 square feet.
Is that
Yep.
basically what you guys had?
basically, we have something from New Hampshire, but it says a body of water typically seasonal that provides essential breeding habitat for certain amphibians and invertebrates, does not support viable fish population, and meets the criteria established by the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. So but
The difference is that in their definition, it's something that is temporary.
yeah, that's what this means, typically seasonal. So we can put that language in. I actually got a whole bunch of stuff that, I have a section on vernal pools here that I was able to get from the web and include some of the Pennsylvania stuff. I saw the Pennsylvania wording. And I just want to read it to you just so you all are aware of what a vernal pool is, because I'm not sure everybody is. And Richard, you're right, that's a very good definition. This is too lengthy to put in there as a definition, but what it says is vernal pools are shallow bodies of water that fill in spring or fall with rain or snowmelt. Some vernal pools are isolated woodland depressions, while others may be found within wetlands such as red maple swamps. Vernal pools often dry up by midsummer because they do not have a permanent source of water. As a result of their seasonal dryness, vernal pools cannot support a fish population. All of these characteristics create a unique environment and provide a valuable breeding habitat for wildlife. Many species of salamanders, frogs, toads, turtles, crustaceans, and plants are dependent on vernal pools for breeding habitat and survival. Vernal pools and vernal pool species are very sensitive to human disturbance from urbanization, agricultural practices, and logging. Vernal pools species depend not only on the pools for breeding sites, but they depend upon the surrounding upland habitat for other life requirements. So things like a turtle or a frog that lives on land and then goes into the pool to breed needs that area around it that we're talking about as a buffer around the vernal pool. That's one of the reasons for buffers, because buffers are the pools itself, the wetlands themselves, are not isolated bodies of water with no connection to their surroundings. They're connected by the fact that wildlife uses them to go in and out, and other species as well. And there are things in the vernal pools like fairy shrimp that only live in vernal pools. They can't survive in ponds and lakes and streams. So that's what a vernal pool is. Now, we can put a definition in there that we're all happy with, and I agree that it needs to say something about it dries up, because that's why fish can't be in there.
So the state of New Hampshire does have an administrative definition of vernal pools. And one of the things that I thought was important about their definition is that it says what a vernal pool is not. So salamanders and frogs can breed in a rut left behind by a log truck, but that doesn't make it an official vernal pool, even though it comes and goes, it dries up in the summertime. It's something that was created by a human disturbance. So, you know, that's kind of an important distinction too, I think.
But, so, you know, the idea of definitions is a good one. We don't have to spend a lot of time finalizing what the definition is right now. But if you like the idea of definitions, so we don't have to define them as in the wording of the ordinance, then let's agree that we can come up with something that's a reasonable definition.
Well, we'll get a copy of your definitions that you came up with all that stuff there, and take a look at it for future discussion, since, yeah, we don't have the copy of that.
If we make like a list of definitions, how do we present that in March?
They go in under, you know, a warrant article for the definitions.
We're gonna have a couple of pages.
This would be
We may, we'll have to
Mr. Member's gonna,
see what we
Most
can.
zoning ordinances that we've looked at have a definition section, just like we have a district boundary section and so on. So it could be after the purpose, it could be purpose and then definitions, and then we go on.
it'd have to be narrowed down a lot.
And we'll take a look at, see what they have for that, and see if we can't, you know, come up with something, you know, that satisfies everyone and fits into the definitions.
Part of, when we were discussing this last night, part of the thought was that by having definitions, it helps people to, I mean, there was a lot of confusion during the first iteration as to what a lot of these words meant. And I think people supported the premise, but there was not enough clarity. So to actually spell those things out in one area of the ordinance
Exactly, yeah,
would really help with clarity, I think, and
Yep.
voter support.
It was one of my questions last time. What
Yeah.
is a vernal pool? And it
Yeah.
couldn't be answered, so yeah, we need definitions.
And later on, we'll get to peatlands, which, you know, we could say, we call it a bog, but
We'll see what the definitions are for, you know, again, we'll go over your definitions, see what you're defining as a peatland
Yep.
or whatever the heck
Yep.
it is there.
you want to get back to talk about buffers, right?
Adam's got something.
While we're on the topic of definitions, if you guys want, there are still two sections in the ordinance where definitions are outside of section 13. It's gonna make it even longer, but we can clean that all up and put them all in section 13. The floodplain district and the adult entertainment districts, those definitions are contained in that section of the ordinance instead of section 13. So we could either have definitions of the wetland ordinance in the wetlands part or in section 13. But then there are still those two places in the ordinance where those definitions are outside of the definition section. So that could be a project for next year also.
And these definitions relate specifically to wetlands. They don't necessarily relate to other things in the ordinance. That's the argument for putting them in here.
So we'll decide where we can put them, where they go when we get closer to the public hearing that time. So that brings us down to buffers, which, again, as you know, my opinion of the buffers, I think it's too much of a property taking, property rights taking, you know, they aren't taking the property, but they're taking a person's right to use that property.
Do you feel that way
I did.
even with the conditional use process?
And I did a little, conditional use, right?
But
Yeah,
I'm just
I do.
wondering, has your opinion altered knowing that we now have the relief of the conditional use process, which we didn't have
No,
before?
it hasn't, because the conditional uses are just a few conditional uses. It's not, you know, you still can't mow that area, right? You can't really use it for a whole heck of a lot unless it's one of the conditional uses. So, yeah, I don't know that that really solves that problem. But I took, just to be fair, I took the smallest area, was your 500 square foot vernal pool, to see what that would take out of somebody's property there. So, you know, 500 square feet is about 25 feet in diameter, a pool of that size. So if you put a 75-foot diameter buffer around that, you'd be taking a little over a half an acre out of the person's property for something that takes up what accumulates to about 3 of our required parking spaces. That's about a 500-foot vernal pool is 3 of our parking spaces. You're taking more than a half an acre of land from somebody from their use, and I don't agree with that.
I understand where that comes from, Sod, when you look at the size of all that. But
Yep.
as I said, the species that use the vernal pool to breed and survive, they don't live in the vernal pool necessarily. They live in the area surrounding it. And if you don't leave that area naturally vegetated, then those species are gone and the vernal pool is no longer serving its purpose.
If you could show me where those species have disappeared just because we don't have a buffer around these vernal pools and everything else in town here, then I might be more inclined to look at your argument. But you haven't come up with any evidence that it really is hurting that.
Anybody who knows anything about the salamander life cycle and the toad life cycle and the frog life cycle that use vernal pools knows where they live in the
Then
season
that
when they're
person who
breeding.
knows should be able to come and present evidence that, yes, this has been destroyed because you didn't have 75 feet around that vernal pool. And we haven't seen that. And, I'm just going by what we have and going by that it takes
Do
too
we need
much.
do we
property
need to
rights.
bring an expert from DES in here to talk about it?
You can, yeah.
Well, the other thing you gotta think about too is we have residential, a 1 acre lot. You take a half an acre away from somebody, they can no longer build on that lot, so they're paying $60,000, $65,000 for a residential lot now. He can't build his home unless he gets a variance, and you being on a ZBA, you know that'd be a very difficult variance for them to sell to you.
Understood, but that's part of what, we're trying to protect an important wetland resource, which is vernal pools. Now, some people have put more value on that than other people do, but that's what we're talking about. We're talking about protecting a breeding place and a special place for special species of organism and so on in town. And if you have one in your property, you actually have, and there aren't that many of them, but there are some on property, but you have a valuable resource right there that you should be proud of.
Oh, I know that because I have quite a bit of property in my house, and there's vernal pools up there. But my property's set up so nobody will ever build up there because I don't want to. But that's me. Okay, that's me. That's my desire on my property. There are people that have property. If they go out today and they go out and they buy this 1 acre lot, they don't see any evidence of a vernal pool at all.
Because
Okay.
they're doing it in the summer?
Right, and then they go back in the spring and April and decide to build their home because they finally got their money together. They go out to do that, and the code enforcement officer goes out there to check things out, there's a vernal pool.
Well, on a practical level, most vernal pools are just gonna go undetected. Somebody's gonna come in and they're gonna do their construction work, and they're not gonna know it was there, and they're just gonna destroy it.
Right, and then in other words, you're saying that even though if you pass this, that people are gonna ignore it, so you're not gonna be able to enforce it anyway.
Some people are gonna, right.
There'll be a lot of people that will. I wouldn't. If it's my land, I'm gonna build what I want on it, as long as
I mean, there's
Obey all
only
the other
so much
zoning.
enforcement we can do in town, right?
that's correct.
But, does that mean we shouldn't try? Does that mean we should just say, oh, well, we can't do anything about this? And I wanna say that the science is there. We're not making this up. The science is out there. In fact, the science recommends a minimum 100-foot buffer. We're going easy with a 75-foot buffer, and we're trying to make it very conditional on larger wetlands, very special wetlands. We're backing off a little bit. We're compromising. The science is there. And I can bring in some handouts for next time to show you that it's there. In fact, what Jay's been saying about a vernal pool, they actually need about 350 to probably 500 feet away from the vernal pool to really protect them. All you're protecting with a 75-foot buffer around a vernal pool is during the breeding season, they will occupy that 75 feet. The salamanders will be underneath logs and stuff during the day when they're not in the pool, so they need that 75 feet. The rest of the year, they need way more than that. So it's the minimum, the bare minimum we can do to maintain some wildlife in this town. That's important.
Where do we typically find vernal pools? Where are they typically
I've got one
located?
at the very top of Tippin Rock, and then there are some that are down low.
So that's in the middle of the forest, right? And the down low ones are associated like with floodplain areas?
Yeah.
Yep.
They're
So-
left over from, glacial workings and depressions that are left behind when the glacier receded and some of the boulders that were there. They're pockets in the land where water accumulates over seasonally, and then, but there's no inlet, there's no stream, there's no outlet, there's no stream outlet. So it just sits there as a pocket of water. And it becomes a breeding place for all sorts of things.
So I just use vernal pools as an example, because that was the smallest thing. I didn't want to take something big and say, look, it's gonna take 10 acres of somebody's property. I wanted to use the smallest thing to see how much property was gonna take from a person, and it ended up being over half an acre. So it also covers vernal pools, yes, but any freshwater wetland over 1,000 square feet, as we're reading from here. Marshes, swamps, bogs, and wooded bottomlands, and surface waters, including rivers, streams, intermittent streams, and land under waters, determine the boundaries, blah, blah, blah. So those buffers are around all of that stuff, not just vernal pools. So, right, yeah, you might have a vernal pool here and there, but there are a lot of other places in town here where you'd be taking 75 feet on both sides of the stream or around a large area there. And in my opinion, again, as you know, it is just too much of a taking. It seems that the wildlife seems to be doing okay without all of these rules that we've had so far. And I haven't seen.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a vote on it so we don't spend the next 4 hours going back and forth over this one thing,
Brandon,
please?
I think it's important, Scott mentioned a stream, and the stream is covered by the shoreland ordinance in the zoning ordinance. You can't put anything between 125 feet from the stream. So that's a different ordinance.
Fourth order? Is that what
Yeah,
you're talking about?
Fourth order stream.
Because that's not every stream, that's a fourth
Okay.
order. Yeah.
So basically, in this particular case, we're looking at trying to limit this to, in terms of a wetland, we're trying to limit it to something that's 10,000 square feet, which it does, a 75-foot buffer around that would indeed increase the area that's protected. Again, it's, the wetland, the water itself is not an isolated piece of property. It is part of its larger environment as well. And if we start to damage that, we lose some of the functionality of those wetlands, including flood control, erosion control.
But my point is, we haven't damaged it, that I know of anyways, that you've shown we haven't damaged it, without the 75-foot buffer there. Nobody's saying to destroy or fill in the wetlands or anything like that. We have all kinds of rules for statewide and local rules to protect the
And
wetland.
one of the reasons we haven't is the planning board has been very, very careful about the way in which stormwater management is done around these things. And we want to include, with the conditional use permit, we want to include the tools for the planning board to make sure that development is responsible so that there is protection. So you could have something in the buffer as long as it is well-designed. So
Well,
that's
you
what
said
the conditional use permit's for.
The planning board's been very careful up till now, then why don't you think the planning board will be careful in the future?
You won't always be here.
It's not me, I
I'm
haven't
just saying,
stopped any of that.
any of us won't always be here. But can I just break out of this for a second? Because you guys didn't invent the idea of buffers, right?
No.
No.
It came from other ordinances. And my question is, most of the towns in our region have wetlands ordinances. Do most of those towns also have buffers included in their wetlands
Great
ordinances?
many of them do.
And I guess before I wanted to jump into a vote as to whether we as a board support or don't support buffers, I would like to have a better idea of, are we being unusual? Or would we be unusual if we didn't have buffers and a wetlands ordinance? Because it seems to me like this is old stuff. And many towns surrounding us and the engineers we work with are really used to dealing with wetlands ordinances and buffers.
Yeah, and I think I gave out a handout during the public hearing or before that even, that talked about all the towns around here that have buffers and or setbacks of some kind. Some of them just call it a setback. It could be anywhere from 35 to 100 plus feet, 125 feet, depending on what you're talking about. The setback is for.
Well, as was mentioned, we could go on this all night long, so
Yeah.
let's just find out right now.
Can I ask a question? How long is the breeding season around the wetlands?
That's,
How long is that?
For what? Frogs or toads?
Very short.
I just want kind of a tangent, but not really. City of Keene, in the spring, shuts down North Lincoln Street for a week.
Yeah, for the salamanders.
For salamanders to come down off the hill into the wetland or the bog, whatever you want to call it, and then they open up. We're talking about vernal pools. Why can we not put like you do in the spring for roads, a specific time period where you can't mow into that area or you can't disturb that area. And then after a certain period, the breeding season's over, then if you need to.
That's why I asked what the breeding season was. What is the breeding
Yeah.
season?
It's usually about a week and a half, in the spring.
Because we can't mow the whole summer, the whole thing, for the 1 week or the 2 weeks of the breeding season.
Well, again, we're not only talking about vernal pools.
No,
We're
okay.
talking about a vast wetland area as described in here. So not only vernal pools. So
Let's
we have
also
vernal
keep
pools.
in mind that this is not like
So
Joe Schmo landowner who's already
you wanna make a
made his
motion on
field
it.
or
Yeah, I
something.
make a motion that we take a vote on it.
Okay, a motion made by Brandon to take a vote on what? What is the vote?
The vote whether we want buffers or not.
Okay, what is your motion?
My motion.
That we do want them?
That we do not want them.
Motion by Brandon. He's not an alternate.
not an
He's a
alternate.
member. No. Motion by Brandon motion by Brandon not to include the buffers in the wetland zoning. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Michael York. Is there any further discussion?
Yes. I think it's way premature to make that kind of decision. I understand your impatience to get this resolved, but I don't think we have enough information.
My
If-
point is, if it's 3-4 against them, then why waste all this time when a simple majority is gonna overrule?
Because it's not a waste of time,
Well,
okay?
let's just take a
And-
vote. I already
and
made the motion and spent second.
What I'm allowed to discuss, right? So it's not a waste of time because it gives us an opportunity to learn more about the topic that we're discussing. You know, I think we're kind of shooting from the hip at this point because we haven't discussed how buffers could be addressed in our conditional use process, exactly how that would work. I just think, I'm really uncomfortable making votes on anything at this point because we don't have all the information yet. They're
Well-
gonna be revising and updating and
The reason for the
having a-
vote is just to streamline and get going in the right direction, because if, like he said, if it gets a public hearing and the planning board does not approve it or says buffers are out, then we spend all that time, all that legalese, reading through it all for nothing.
Yeah,
So let's
I get-
find out now
I
where the
get
planning
that,
board
but why
stands.
couldn't we find out after we have our next joint meeting?
Well,
Why do
again,
we have to do this tonight?
it can always be brought up as a petition for a warrant
Is
article.
that what you want? Because I feel like that would not be a very collaborative thing.
Well, again, I'm saying,
We
it
would
always,
rather collaborate
not-
with you to come up with something that works
yeah,
for the entire town.
but a motion's on the floor, so
But we
And
can
we're
still
discussing-
discuss it.
Can we discuss
still
the motion?
discuss it.
Can we
not with
discuss-
those, not with them.
Okay.
It's what
Only the
planning
board members can do
discusses.
that.
I'd like to just make a point. I think it's important for something of this magnitude for the people to decide. And for us to remove it from a warrant, potentially a warrant article, is really doing an injustice to the community. The community voted last time around, and they show they're pretty much in favor of the conservation district and what it represents. And a lot of people in this community do talk about, you know, preserving this and the importance of it. It just so happens that there's, I'm gonna say it, that there's a block of people that seem to vote a certain way. And I think a lot of our votes should be roll call votes, so people know who's voting for what on this board and several of the other boards, because they seem to always vote a certain way. And it's their belief and they can do that. But I think it's important for the people to be able to vote on what they want.
Well, if you bring it a step further, letting the people decide, why not make it voluntary? And then the people can decide what they want to do. If they want to put a 75-foot buffer around
think
the
that's
wetlands by their
different.
property.
I think
No,
that's
that's not
different.
different. That's people
I
deciding.
think that's
That's
extremely.
property owners deciding, and not just voters, that's taxpayers deciding.
May I ask a question?
No, you can't,
So
we're
are you not,
deliberating.
are you not interested in knowing, I mean, I'm sincere in my curiosity about how unusual having buffers is in our region, and why would we, if they are indeed as common as I've been led to believe, why would we want to be the outlier? Why
Well,
would Swanzey want to have that position
Again,
as a town that doesn't care about protecting its
If it isn't
wetland
shown,
resources?
if it isn't shown where the lack of buffers is hurting something, then why put them in?
Because that's going to be after the fact, okay?
Well,
The
why hasn't it
destruction,
happened up until now? Why hasn't it happened?
I'm
all
sure
the way
it
up until now?
has, I'm sure it
Well-
has, but
well,
we
then
haven't
where?
recorded
Let's-
that,
Why not?
Jeff say, yeah.
because nobody's looking for it.
Well, why aren't you
We
looking
mentioned
for it? I mean, you know, if it's that
Because there's a
important,
lot of
why isn't
other
anybody
things to be
for it?
looking for,
Okay,
right?
well, all right.
So the absence of evidence based on something that's historically happened, I don't
Well, You have to have evidence to prove that it historically has happened here in Swansea. We
I
haven't
have
seen it.
evidence that shows, I mean, our life experience shows us that as time goes by, the land that remains to be developed is increasingly marginal. And because in Swansea, it's marginal because it's wet. And so that water is an important resource for our entire town, for all the citizens in town, in addition to the person who happens to own that piece of wetland. So this is going to become an ever increasingly important issue for all of us because they don't make land anymore. And I'm really not prepared, and I think as a board it would be irresponsible for us to make really important decisions this early in the process of reviewing a document that is, I don't want to say is half-baked, but it's not complete. Okay, there's a whole revision that Jay has prepared that hasn't been incorporated into this, so I think it's really premature to make huge philosophical decisions based on insufficient information.
Okay, anybody else? So the motion on the floor is to remove buffers from the wetlands district. It was by Brandon, seconded by Michael York. We've had our discussion, and all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Well, I'll do the roll call vote, since I think you brought up roll call vote. Brandon?
Yes.
Yes. Richard?
No.
Michael?
Yes.
Me, yes. No? Victoria?
I'm sorry, you're gonna
Oh, sorry, wanted to slow down? Okay, Brandon was yes. Richard?
No.
Michael York?
Yes.
Scott Self? Yes. Mark?
No.
Victoria?
No.
And James?
Yes.
Yes. So what is that, there's 1, 2, 3,
Four.
4 yes,
And 3 no.
3 no's. Okay, so the motion does carry. So, that brings us on to general provisions.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Future meetings, we reintroduce that.
It can be reintroduced. Yep.
Okay.
We've got a long ways to go before the public
I think
hearings.
that's what we should do.
That can be reintroduced anytime. We've got a long ways to go. We don't have those public hearings until way later in the year.
So what you're saying is we can still educate ourselves on what, like she said, that we want to be more educated, so that option is still there.
If it's
to be more
reintroduced, yeah,
educated.
and it looks like a good idea, then it can always be added into it and brought to the public hearing. We haven't had public hearings yet, so it'll be brought then. Any changes on general provisions? That's pretty much the old stuff there. 1 and 2, boundary appeals, talks about that, that's covered. And uses permitted, that's the same as it was in the old. Under D1, we had cross out of man-made pond. If this is uses permitted in the Wetlands Conservation District, provided that all required permits have been obtained, are as follows. And we had construction of wells for water supply, and we had crossed out man-made ponds as permitted by New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services because it involved dredging, and dredging wasn't allowed.
We moved it to another
It's a
place.
conditional. It's in conditional, yeah, but right, it's not under permitted use because it
Right.
involves the dredging part of it. Wildlife habitat, that's the same. Conservation areas and footpaths and footbridge, we didn't make any changes there.
I think we did.
Oh, did we?
I
What was
think we
changed
did.
there?
If you look to the left, number 3 is longer, and we omitted the A and B.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, we moved it to another part, didn't we? Yeah, we moved it to another part.
Yeah, because that's part of the review.
Down below.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's see, and then we have open spaces as permitted by subdivision regulations. Do we even need to say open spaces is a permitted use? It's fine in there, but I mean, do you have to, open space is open space, it's not really use, it's just an open space.
Once again, that was already in the ordinance, and so
Yeah.
if we don't
It
have to
was-
change it, it's less of a warrant
It's
article.
just odd that it's a use. Okay, well,
Excuse me, on that open spaces, if we have a development
depends, let's see, it was under cluster development. I think we had one of those types of land use ordinances there. You did have to have open space, a certain amount of open space, if the buildings are gonna be clustered together rather than in just individual lots. So
We have a separate ordinance
it is,
for
yeah,
that, yeah.
yeah. So, open spaces.
Scott, I would like to, I'm not voting, but I would like to say that an open space definitely has a use.
All right. It's a
I-
permitted use.
Yeah.
I would advise the board to say, you know, why add another thing to the warrant here? It's not that important.
Just leave it in there.
Stays or goes.
Yep. Okay, let's see, bringing us down to any changes on any of these? Let's see, number 5, forestry and tree farming.
Do you wanna leave buffers in that for them right now?
Probably anything that pertains to buffers would be crossed out in it, but the wording would stay the same.
Other than that, yes.
So in 5 and 6, the way things stand now, you cross off the words within buffers.
Within buffers, yep. And I guess that would be number 10 as well. We had 150 or 200 square foot building. The 200 foot is in our zoning ordinance for a storage shed that anybody can put on their property. So I think we ought to just change it to 200 feet to keep it consistent. It was 150. I'm on number 10, under D. Yep.
We would prefer actually that it would be structures no larger than 100 feet. And then if you wanted something larger, 200, 300, 400, whatever, you'd need to go for a conditional use permit. I feel like if you put something that's large enough to become a garage, to park a car in, you really should be going to get a conditional use permit for that.
But 200 square feet isn't that big, right?
Isn't it 10 by 20? Wouldn't it-
No, it's not.
10 by 20 is 200 square feet.
200,
You can
yeah.
put
It's
a car in
1/3 of
there
my
easily.
small barn, so it's not very big at all.
It's not big at all, but you can put a car in it.
Yeah, you can put a car in it.
Okay, so
Go with 150.
But within,
Well,
that says, but the
that
last.
number 10 might have to be crossed out,
Yeah,
because that
'cause
says
within
only
buffer.
within the buffer, because
Yeah.
if that's crossed out, then we'd be allowing it in the wetlands, and that's not right. So 10
True.
probably ought to
True.
be eliminated.
So possibly that's a little limited.
Yeah,
I think Scott makes a good point. If we don't have a buffer, we don't have to have a permission of putting structure in it.
no, because, yeah, if that's not there, it would essentially say you could put it in the wetlands.
In the conditional uses, it's allowed with a conditional use in the
Is-
buffer, but
Should it,
that
should
also
any,
would be removed from the conditional uses because, in other words, you could put the structure right up next to the wetland. That's what this would allow.
yeah,
And you wouldn't need a permit.
I think we still require a permit for the 200 square foot one.
Well,
If we're changing this one to something
Yes, you need
different.
a permit, but you'd have to be 5 feet from the rear of the property, but if the rear of the property isn't the wetland, then you could put it right to the edge of the wetland.
Mhm.
And because if you don't have a buffer, then you're not putting it in the wetland, but that means you can put it right next to it.
We're creating a problem for ourselves
How so?
with this definition or non-definition of buffer.
No, we're not. I don't see that we are. I mean, you just cross out the word buffers in these. We're gonna be going through it again anyways, I'm sure. Let's see, so we could cross 10 out completely, because that was only dealing with the buffer, the zones.
I have kind of a general question that maybe you can't answer right now, but is it that you're opposed to a naturally vegetated buffer, or is it that you're opposed to any setbacks at all? Because
I'm not-
most every town around here, except for like Hinsdale and Winchester, has some kind of wetland setbacks. Whether they're generally not naturally vegetated, that's about 5 other towns around here I could list, but our neighboring towns, including Keene, all have some kind of setback from a wetland, just like a property line setback. Like I said, it ranges from 25 feet, in some cases up to 125 feet. Is that something you're opposed to as well, or is it just the idea of not being able to mow it?
No, it's not even being able to mow it. It's the idea that you're taking somebody's use of their property away from them and saying they can't even mow it. That's why I brought up mowing.
That's the buffer part.
Exactly, yeah.
So are you opposed to a setback of any size?
Because that would take care of the structure business here. You'd have to put it, the setback distance from the wetland.
Well, if we cross out number 10, that takes care of the structure one as well. I mean, it's not mentioned in there, so you're.
But I would like my question answered, because we need to know how to proceed. We as our group, we want at a minimum some kind of setbacks, because that's what other towns have, that's what the science supports.
Setbacks from a building, correct?
Setbacks for a building, for a parking lot, for something that's gonna damage the wetland. For a,
Can you distinguish the setback between the buffer for me? Like,
Okay, a setback is the distance a building can be from the property line, or in this case, a wetland. That's a building. The buffer
So
is.
it's similar to a buffer.
Similar.
It's sort of similar,
Except-
but it's that, the buffer is nothing can be there at all. The
And the-
setback is distance from the building to the wetland.
And one other point, Jim, the buffer is naturally vegetated. In other words, this would not necessarily have to be naturally vegetated.
Okay.
It could be a lawn right up to the edge of the wetland. We wouldn't recommend that, but it could be. And if we use a setback, all we're talking about is distance. We're not talking about what's in that distance.
Okay.
Is that right, Scott? You agree with that?
Actually,
correct.
Keene does
That's
that, they do not even, they do their lawns, the Y, you look at, when you go in there, the lawn goes right up to the wetlands right there. You go down to the golf courses, those greens are right on the river. They don't even obey their own
I don't
city
think that's a
itself.
good idea, but whatever.
That's keen. So.
So I don't think it's a good idea to look at other towns to see what they're doing. This
You
is
don't?
Swansea.
So,
This is Swansea, I don't
Yeah.
care what goes on in other towns.
well, that sort of
I care
got
about
us
Swansea.
all those apartment units, and that gets us all the storage units. We have to care what goes on in other towns.
I think, Mike, that, you're right. We as Swansea need to make our own decisions.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we don't need to know what's around us, to be aware
Well,
of it.
that's fine, but I think some emphasis is placed on what other towns are doing.
No,
We
I
all
think-
know what they're doing.
I think that if somebody else does something, it's important to understand why they do it before we decide how we should do it. That's all I'm saying. It makes sense to know what's going on in other places. It's like, you don't wanna necessarily do what you don't want to do, but if somebody else has got a reason for doing it that you haven't considered, it'd be nice to know about that. That's all. Scott, so, I mean, I'll go back to the structures. It bothers me if a structure is allowed to be right up next to the wetland, and so that's where a setback, if we don't do buffers, maybe we could do a setback,
Yeah, we can
instead.
talk about setbacks and see
Well,
what that would
we do
entail.
have setbacks of 25 feet,
Not from the wetland.
From the wetland?
not from the wetland,
I
but
don't
from
think
property
from the-
lines.
oh, property line,
And
yeah.
my thinking is, if that's something that everybody wants, maybe 25-foot setback would be okay. I don't know.
We have to see how it,
It'd be kind of consistent with our other
That would,
setbacks.
you know, the section that we took out on buffers could say something about setbacks, is what I'm saying, for the boundaries.
Yep, good look at that.
So if you'd like us to look at language for that next time we have a joint meeting, we'll be glad to do that.
Yep, you can, and the planning board members can think about language for that as well.
Yep.
It's just a setback, it's not rocket science, as I say.
Scott, to go back to number 5, I'm just thinking, if we
Yep.
take out the within buffers,
Yep.
I'm looking over at the original number 5, which was forest management and tree farming within 75 feet of wetlands, blah, blah, blah. So I wonder if maybe we could, if we're gonna take out the within buffers, if it would make sense, and I'd like these guys' opinion on this, to revert back to the original number 5, and likewise the original number 6.
Or if we went back to the original, which actually allowed forestry and tree farming within the wetlands.
Within the wetland, did it?
The original, not this number 5 on the left, but the original, the old one
This
that we
is the
already
one that the voters approved, right?
had. Yeah, this is the one, right?
On the left.
Yep.
So maybe if we, I wonder if
So
that
go
would
back
make
to that number
sense
5, yeah.
to you guys. I don't know, or maybe that's another discussion
No,
point.
that probably makes sense, because it really doesn't mean the same thing now.
Right.
without the buffers there.
Yeah.
So it
So we
would,
could
it
remove
would
that
revert back to
as a
number,
change.
revert back to number 5. I mean,
And leave
so
it
the
the way
one,
it is, we don't have to put in a change as a, say, warrant article for 5 and 6.
yes, right, yep.
So the use is permitted, there's a little bit of language changes in this newest version, but it wouldn't be a language change for 5 and 6.
Yep. So we're just keeping 5 and 6. Yep. And let's see, 7 is maintaining, repairing, replacing. I guess that's the same. Removal.
I'm sorry, when you said 6, you're referring to the original, the left-hand column?
The left-hand one with the 75 feet there,
Yeah, middle line is
agricultural
fine.
within that, yeah. Let's see, number 7, anything on that one? I think that's the same as it was there. The number 8 is a new one, the removal of invasive species as identified by the USDA for the state of New Hampshire. So would that be in the wetland, removal of invasive species?
It could be.
In the wetland, okay, it can be, okay. Scientific research and educational activities. And again, number 10, we can cross out.
Assuming we don't want to say within a setback.
Well, we could replace, we're talking about a setback in somewhere else in here. We could put a setback thing there, but probably a setback should be, probably not under uses permitted. A setback is not a use. But
But the construction of the structure is within the setback, no larger than 100 feet, or 150.
no, it wouldn't be within a setback. It would be, the setback would have to be from the building to the wetlands, not
Okay,
within a setback.
so if that's the case, then we don't need number 10.
That's right. That's what we've been saying, okay. Number 11 brings us the uses listed above, provided that all required permits have been acquired, are presumed to be consistent with the protection of wetland functions and value when in accord with the following prohibitions, and so are allowed in the wetland conservation district, including buffers, we can cross that out of there, without a conditional use permit. These uses should not, and we got the obstruct or change the flow of water, we didn't change anything there. Alter natural contour of the surface, didn't change anything there, and all filling good in wetland.
When we strike including buffers, would you put setbacks in that
If we
parentheses?
decide to go that way, yeah, we would.
Yeah, we'd have to see about the setbacks already, that can be added in there. Then it brings us to conditional uses, item F. It says
So-
subject,
That was one thing that I also did a revision on, just to shorten it, because we talked about moving parts of this away from it at the meeting.
what is that you're talking about? The conditional uses?
Conditional uses, that.
Okay,
Yeah, so I can read you, again, I'm sorry I don't have copies, but I can read you what I wrote.
let's hear it.
Conditional uses, any activity within the Wetland Conservation District, including buffers that is not listed, this is from Adam actually, that is not listed as a permitted use in section 7, article D, is presumed to negatively impact the functions and values of the wetland unless the applicant can demonstrate otherwise, as outlined below. Subject to the provisions of RSA 674-21, the planning board is hereby authorized to issue conditional use permits. The following activities may be allowed through the issuance of a conditional use permit by the planning board. So starting off with the idea that if it's not listed, it's considered to be harmful, and then giving the authority to the planning board to issue conditional use permits.
So that would go under F, because
Under F,
some of the things you said were further down in here.
yes.
So you've,
It shortens the
yeah, you've brought them up to there, so then let's skip over that part of it too, until we see your revised conditional use.
It just shortens the paragraphs. Part of, I thought that was the gist of our discussion before, and then Adam presented language from the state ordinance, model ordinance that I copied there.
Yep,
So I think if we can present that another time as far as the paragraph under F, but then we can look at 1, 2, 3, et cetera.
okay, and the uses, conditional uses, you know, the number 1 was creation of new lots by subdivision that would require the disturbance of or crossing of lands. So I don't think creation of new lots should be a conditional use that the planning board can give under condition, because that's a subdivision. You create new lots by a subdivision, and that's a whole separate process by the planning board. It's not a use. It's an action taken on the land, a subdivision. So I don't think creation of new lots by subdivision should be a conditional use whereby if you meet the criteria under here, you can have your subdivision.
Well, the idea for that, of course, is that you would not then be allowed to have a subdivision which would require the crossing of wetland. So this would mean that you, as a planning board, would have your hands tied. So the idea of this is to allow you to provide such things in
Well,
the subdivision.
if we took out creation of new lots by subdivision, that would require, and just left under as a conditional use, disturbance of or crossing of lands within the Wetlands Conservation District, or just crossing of lands within the Wetlands Conservation District. That's a conditional use if you have to cross the land for whatever, whether it's a subdivision or whatever you're doing
Okay,
there.
so we could put uses that involve, number one, uses that might involve the crossing of lands within the Wetlands Conservation.
Well, the crossing is a use. It's a conditional use.
Okay.
You know, you're granting conditional use to cross that land. So if we left it crossing of lands within the Wetlands Conservation District as a conditional use, that's a conditional use.
Do you agree, Adam, crossing is a use? Because it's the activity, I'm splitting hairs, Scott, I'm sorry, but
Yep.
the activity of the construction project or whatever that is we're putting up a building or we're putting a business in there, that's the use.
It's creating that crossing.
And the fact that that use involves creating a crossing is what's going on here. I don't see crossing as a use. I think that's the use of people.
So how are you gonna grant a conditional permit for someone to cross a crossing, which we do have at places in town here? I mean, if that's not a use, what is it? I mean, how are we gonna grant somebody relief to get to their piece of property across a
Right.
piece of wetland?
Yeah, I'm thinking this through. I mean, we had a zoning board variance for property on Separate Drive that we
Yep,
had to give a
that's what I'm
variance
talking
for.
about, yep.
And this is really supposed to address that, I believe, so that it would be possible, whatever we say here needs to make that possible under a conditional use.
Well, I think it should be left then as a conditional use is you can get a permit to cross the lands, crossing of lands within the Wetlands Conservation District.
I thought number 3 already addressed this.
Number 3,
Yeah.
let's see, construction, repair, or maintenance of streets, roads, or other access ways, including driveways. Yeah, you're right. Footpath, bridges. Yeah, I think you're right, Adam. So we
Yeah,
could
so
get
this
rid
is,
of number 1.
so I guess number one is all about what happens when a subdivision creates new lots.
But it doesn't matter really because number 3 covers it, like Adam said.
So can I ask a question about subdivisions, because I'm ignorant
Yeah.
here?
Yep.
If a subdivision is created, both lots have to have access to the road, right? Somehow?
Subdivision, it depends on the subdivision. Sometimes they build their own road up in there. There's several lots in there off of their own road. It doesn't have to
So
go
they have
to
a shared
main road.
driveway or something
Yeah.
like that, so it's on one lot, but
But it
other
can-
lots can use it?
Can be either way, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I think this is dealing with the fact that you might have 2 lots now where you had one, and both of them have to have access, and some of that access might involve crossing a wetland. And could be covered under number 3. Productive use, subdivision could be productive use of the lot, so I can see it either way.
Yeah, I think number 3 covers that. I think that's what Adam said. Good
Okay.
idea. I think we could just get rid of number 1 and just leave it as number 3, the construction, repair, or maintenance of streets, roads, and other access ways. Yeah, that covers it, including driveways, yeah, footpath, bridges. These
Question,
essentials to the productive use.
can we are we allowed to subdivide and create landlocked lots?
No.
Okay, so is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, I'm talking about the possibility that a landlocked lot could be created by subdivision and allowing access to it.
But I think what Scott's saying is that we would not approve a subdivision that would create a landlocked
Right, 'cause it's
lot.
not legal.
Is that true,
You
Scott?
can't,
But-
yeah, you can't do that.
can't
But
do
in
it.
order,
No.
okay, you wouldn't,
'Cause
but
you were
in order
asking
to
about
do that,
subdivisions.
in order to do that, it might be necessary to cross a wetland. And so that's why this is, if you say you can't have this subdivision because you haven't, it's isolated, they say, well, why can't we cross the wetland? This would allow you to do so, but I think Scott's right that number 3 would allow that.
Okay,
And it would be a condition of the subdivision, providing they got that conditional use permit to cross the wetlands to make that subdivision happen. It would be a condition on approving the subdivision.
okay.
Right.
It's my understanding that rear lots are landlocked, so.
Not really. Rear lots have to have a 50-foot wide access way through the original lot. So they aren't landlocked.
Okay.
So, yeah, number 3 covers that. Let's cross out number 1 then, leave it at number 3, shorten it a little bit.
Now, you had asked, I think, in number 3, we've talked about rewording this somehow, and,
You're on number 3. Let's
number
go-
2, sorry.
Yeah, let's go to number 2, because number 2 doesn't make sense if the buffers are not approved. Because you're talking about construction of structures or additions to buildings associated with and additions, and we're talking in the wetlands.
Right, so
So,
what we reworded it last night as construction of new structures or additions to legally pre-existing structures as of the effective date of this ordinance, provided there's no encroachment closer to the wetland than what currently exists. So that covers new construction of things that would be added on to existing structures that might be closer to the wetland than they should be, or might be on a non-conforming lot or whatever. It just allows that kind of construction for the conditional use permit.
so we have to put that on standby, because if we're gonna go with setbacks, the setbacks would be to that. If there were no setbacks to a wetland, then you wouldn't be able to enforce that one, because someone could say, look, there are no setbacks, I can put that building right there if I want to. So we'll have to
Yep.
put number 2 to
Yeah,
coincide
we
with
can
if they're gonna be
certainly
setbacks.
want to discuss that again, once we decide about setbacks. Because you're right,
So we'll table that one on there,
but
and
you understand why we want to do that. We don't want, if we have a building there that's legally there because it's grandfathered basically, we don't want to necessarily allow more construction that comes closer to the wetland.
but it can now,
It
as it
can
stands,
now.
it can now.
It wouldn't if there's, provided no encroachment exists closer to the wetland than what currently exists. That's what the language is for. Okay,
And
sorry.
that'd be the conditional use permit for that.
And in number 4, if we crossed out in the buffer,
We're good with number 3? So Main Street's right, yeah, we're number 3, we did all that. So number 4,
we crossed out in the buffer last night, because we can't imagine that impervious surfaces would ever be allowed in the wetland.
where are you reading from?
Number 4, impervious surfaces and activities which result in soil compaction.
Yeah, because ours says impervious surfaces and activities which result in soil compactation such as parking vehicles or heavy equipment. There was no buffer or anything.
Right, so, we just had we're talking about, I can mention in general terms, what we're talking about in the zoning board right now. Eversource is redoing the structures for the power lines through Swanzey. And in order to do that, they have to put some impervious surfaces for access into the wetland, and also for bases for the towers.
Yeah,
And that's in the wetland. So it's not just in the buffer, that's in the wetland. And so that needs to have they shouldn't have to come for a variance for that. That could easily be a conditional use permit.
yeah, right.
So that's why that's
So-
there.
That number 4 would cover that then. Let's see your results.
And that
Yeah.
might be related to number 2 too, because if we're talking about new pads for these towers, et cetera, that could be covered by number 2, construction of, because there are already towers in there that could be added to. So I just want to put that out there.
Okay, number 4. Number 5, new or expanded utility systems. Again, we're talking about Eversource there, stormwater management systems and rights-of-way or easements associated with the systems. Okay, that, either one permit can get issued for either one of those for
Right.
Eversource. And restoration of a previously disturbed area within the Wetland Conservation District. And then a new one we added in was man-made ponds as permitted by New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services because it involves dredging. We took it from earlier
Yeah.
on in here
And
and put it here. And we have conditional use criteria, permit criteria. And it says a conditional use permit may be granted for allowed uses within the Wetlands Conservation District when all of the following criteria have been met. I think it's kind of confusing for somebody reading it for allowed uses, because there are allowed uses and then there are conditional uses, so it might want to say a conditional use permit may be granted for the conditional uses listed in section 7F, and when all of the following criteria have been met. so it specifies what uses we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's exactly a good point.
And number 1 says the proposed use and/or activity is only allowed if there is no viable alternative. I suggest we change that to reasonable. It fits what we're trying to say better, and number 2 has reasonable in it as well. Viable.
I'm sorry, I don't.
Go ahead.
I read another ordinance which has this in it, and it used the word practicable.
Mhm.
Practicable or practical?
It was said practicable, and I'm not sure that's the right English, but it said practicable in that particular ordinance. That, viable means it's possible. Practicable means it's practical to do it, and that may be what you're getting at here.
But reasonable means it's reasonable to do it, and we have reasonable in number 2. I think we use reasonable, and actually the RSA's use reasonable a lot in there, as far as their legal terms go.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, this is all in the purview of the planning board. If they believe something is reasonable, they should be able to do it.
Shall we change it to reasonable, or
Yeah.
not?
Yeah,
Reasonable
because that's
sounds
between
reasonable.
reasonable and practical, there's no, what I want to say, there's no difference in those two terms, really, the way we're using them.
Well,
But reasonable is something that the average person would understand better, I
I
think.
think so too, Mike.
Okay, then we'll
I
use
just offered that
reasonable.
as another word because I saw it.
And let's see, and another criteria is number 3, the nature, design, siting, and scale of the proposed use and the characteristics of the site, including but not limited to topography, soils, vegetation, and habitat, are such that when taken as a whole, will avoid the potential for adverse impacts to the wetland resource. We didn't change anything there, that's the same. Let's see, and we had a notation on number 4, the wetlands conservation district shall be maintained in a natural state to the maximum extent possible. We had a notation to move it to site plan regulations, could be either one. Any consensus on that?
Go ahead.
Move it to site plan regs?
Yeah, we had quite a discussion about,
Yeah, we
Site
wanted to
plan.
reword it.
and I was tired at that point, so where did we come down on that?
Well, we wanted to reword it because we thought, first of all, Adam left off some of B, so it doesn't make any sense the way B is stated there. But
And I think A sort of misses the point of the original too.
Yes.
So we wanted to do a kind of a rewrite on this, whether or not it goes to the,
Yeah, it
Site
didn't make
plan
any
regs.
sense as it's written there, it didn't make much
Yeah.
sense there, so, yeah, the dead, diseased, unsafe, or fallen trees, that's what you're talking about?
yes, and
Yeah.
the original ordinance, the original wording here had that stumps would be left intact in the ground, which is the best practice here, as far as the science goes. So it got a little confused in here, and we need to have that reworded completely.
But we had in there that it said that the dead, diseased, unsafe, or fallen trees, stumps, and root systems, saplings, shrubs, or ground cover may be required to be removed.
right, that's a very different thing.
We had that, so.
What it said before was stumps and their root systems shall be
Yeah.
left intact in the ground unless removal is specifically approved in conjunction with a conditional use permit.
Mhm.
So that allows the conditional use permit to say we can remove that stump, but it had to be but it was a specific thing.
But it would have to be another use described in the conditional use. The conditional use permit being removing a stump from the ground, that'd have to be added in there, so you could get a conditional use permit to do so.
Yes, and
Whereas
that's,
in this one here,
we noticed that also, because
in
that's,
this one here just says that you can do any of those things, may be required to do them, maybe not.
Yeah,
Yes,
let us tackle the rewording of that.
It depends,
because
yeah,
that's how it
on
goes.
what the Conservation Commission says about the site plan and what the planning board, and all that stuff. It gives the option that they may be removed, but may not be removed. So you guys are gonna reword that, A and B as well, because B doesn't make
Right.
much sense at all.
Yeah.
and we understand that number 4 isn't really, this is when all of the following criteria have been met, that's the header up there.
Mhm.
And then it says, the criteria is that the district shall be maintained in a natural state to the maximum extent possible. That's a criteria,
Yep,
but then we get to specifics, and I'm not sure the specifics need to be there or not. We just have to think that through.
think about it then, okay? So yeah, it's A and B there. So number 5, the proposed use shall not have any adverse impact on abutting properties, which is a given. The planning board always does
Yep.
that anyways. We had number 6 to move to the site plan regulations.
And that's the place where, we're not sure that, this is a Cordell question. I'm gonna read to you from something from an article called Look Before You Leap, Understanding Conditional Use Permits by Christine Fillmore, January 2006. This paragraph says, regardless of which board is given authority to administer conditional use permits, in order to avoid a due process claim, municipalities must ensure that the conditional use permitting requirement and the process is laid out in detail, including the factors that must be met for the conditional use permit to be issued. The conditional use permit provisions must include the necessary specifics that involve the application procedure and the grant of denial. Also, a conditional use permit provision will be deemed unconstitutionally vague and a violation of due process when persons of common intelligence must guess its meaning and applicability. I mean, it just, whether or not this has to be there should be up to Cordell.
Well, it has to be somewhere.
Yes.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be in the zoning ordinance. That paper doesn't say that. It has to be somewhere laid out, and usually the site plan review regulations lays out the criteria and how a person goes about doing their site plans.
Understood, but this specifically says it needs to be in the zoning ordinance, and so that's the question.
Oh, that says it
for
needs to
Cordell.
be in the zoning ordinance?
Yes.
Who is this lady, Jay?
I pulled an article, it comes from it was an article in a publication called New Hampshire Town and City.
Yeah, just wonder if she was an attorney or
I
just
think
somebody with an
I don't know her
opinion.
background other than the fact that when I was searching for information on conditional
Right.
use permits, this came up.
It's one of these.
And I want to be very sure, I want to just be very sure that we did the thing right, so we
Right.
didn't have these due
Well, of
process claims. So that's why I thought Cordell would be the best one to weigh in on, because I think these criteria are the ones the Conservation Commission is gonna wanna weigh in on mostly and help you with. And whether they're here or in site plan review regulations, it's not that important, except for the fact that if somebody said, well, if you're saying the nature of the topography, soils and slopes and the vegetation is why you didn't approve this, then where is it in the zoning ordinance?
Right.
It'll be there one
Actually,
place or another.
I disagree with Jay on that, because I think it's important that it be in the ordinance, because the ordinance is what the voters are going to approve. They have no say about our site plan regs. I think we'll end up, in practical terms, I think we'll end up with a checklist, basically like we have with our site plan regs, that will include some version, some iteration of these concepts. But I think the concept should be in this ordinance, because this is our legally, officially adopted, or this tells anybody who's reviewing the document that these are the kinds of things that the planning board is going to review, and it gives the voters a chance to agree that those are the things we should be reviewing.
I guess so, but, the zoning ordinance are the laws that the town votes on, and this is the procedure to get there, just like our site plan review regulations. We have the laws for the zoning in here, under zoning, obviously, and then the site plan review regulations are all the details of how you do it. And this-
Understood, Scott, and that's,
So we're just gonna ask the
But we
attorney
have
that anyway.
standards, we have standards in our in our zoning that, I'm thinking about
Yeah.
landscaping,
It
we've got
doesn't-
specific standards.
Doesn't matter to me which one it goes in, we'll ask the attorney that. If it goes in site plan review regulations, they can be changed and modified without the voters. If
Right.
it doesn't, they can't.
Right.
If something in there doesn't work and you wanna change it, we can change it that way, but Cordell will give us an
yeah,
answer on that.
the
Isn't that
the
correct,
real
Adam?
question is whether the law says that it has to be
Correct.
in our legal document.
Yep,
or
that's
whether
all we're
it's-
asking,
Right.
right? So, let's see, conditional use permit application procedure, oh yeah, we have that, absolutely.
Just to note, buffer is mentioned like 5
Yeah,
times in the
yeah.
section.
Yeah, we have,
Should we
right.
change that to setbacks?
Well,
Under
yeah,
number
but we
6,
could also
all the-
have the wording to say any buffer or setback, right? So that means if one applies, and then.
Well,
it
if
becomes a
they-
generic. Just a-
We just have to
food
change
for
it.
Doesn't
thought.
need to, yeah,
Just have to do a global
The buffer
replace.
has to come out of
If we go to setbacks, we do a global replace of this thing
Yep.
and fix it.
so we have the procedure here that I don't think we did any changes to.
I think that we talked about how Adam might come up with some wording for here based on what he thought.
Let's see, we had, it brings us down to special provisions. I don't think we the special provision was
I don't have any notes on it.
75, change to 75 feet, yeah, for a septic system.
Oh, yeah.
That was special provisions there. And
changed the number 2 a little bit, I think.
Number 2, okay, you change that to what?
I'm trying to find it again in here. No, in areas served by municipal water and sewer, wetland areas may be used to satisfy minimum lot area and
What's the
setback
double
requirements and may be used when applying a residential density factor. So
That's what we have here.
It had said in areas not served by municipal water and sewer, wetland areas will not. It was
Yeah,
negative.
we
You wanted to
changed
make
it, we
positive.
changed it, because a negative is not good. We
Right.
changed it the last
So
meeting.
we all
here.
agreed with that, and
Yeah.
that's what we are.
Yep. Areas exempted from this section. So it says areas exempted from this section will include wetlands associated with currently functioning and maintained man-made, and then it goes down the list, but man-made fourth-order streams does not apply because they aren't man-made, lakes and all that ponds, so I would suggest that we reword that to read, areas exempted from this section will include wetlands associated with, number 1, fourth-order streams, blah, 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 and then number 2, currently functional, maintained, man-made, and then A, B, C, and D, ditches, sedimentation, agriculture, and all that stuff there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because it breaks out the fourth-order stream, because
Yep.
that's different from the man-made
It
stuff.
is different. We just wanted to put it there, but we didn't have the
Yep.
right language.
Yep, but that's, I think that would do it there.
Yep.
And that's the end. The wording, I guess so, unless Adam captured it. You want me to read it again? You got it, Adam? Okay, Adam got it. So let's see, so you're gonna give a copy of definitions and all that type of stuff that you guys did.
I'll give it to Adam, and he can give
So
it to
he can
you.
get a copy of it to us.
Richard, I'll look at the vernal pool and see if I can include because it's dries up in the summer. And I'll also make sure that Adam and I are on the same page with some of what these changes were, and so on. So when the Conservation Commission meets again, we can talk about it. And I'm not sure when our next get-together will be, but
We got plenty of time.
this has been a good exchange of views.
Yep, got plenty of time between now and then. Although we will have other things on the agenda,
Yes, you will. I'm
well,
sure you will.
because of the, Adam gave us a handout here of the state laws that have changed, right, Adam? We're gonna have to change those in our zoning.
We have to look
So
at them, yeah.
we'll have to have separate, we'll have to decide on that too.
And just a warning, this is forthcoming next year, that's gonna be worse.
Well, let's
We're
hope
really
not.
gonna push them.
So-
They're gonna take our ability to manage our own town away from us at the state level.
I'm hoping not, but yes. That's what
They're
that's
trying.
the push is for. Yeah.
They're trying.
Yes.
Just an observation for the Conservation Commission. Went by Base Hill Road, and the Arlington paving trucks are backed up to the wetland. Dumps are vertical.
Yep.
What is running out of those things?
They do that
Same thing that's on the
regularly.
roads, running into all the streams and
Yes, I
everything
know,
off the
but
roads.
is there some way of?
It's the
taking-
paving stuff that's on all of our roads.
I mean, is there some way that can be rectified where they can't get
Well,
that
if
close?
they're dumping into the wetlands.
No, it's
then
not.
Definitely it can.
But I'm sure after a
When
day's
rains-
work, they're washing or doing something to those things. And I know why they're vertical, so that they won't collect water
Yeah.
and rust, but
Yeah.
That'd be something the code enforcement officers should check out.
This is a
since
code
we don't.
enforcement thing, because if rain comes down and it fills the buckets of those things and washes into the wetlands, and that's dumping.
Maybe we get the code enforcement officer to check it out.
make a note of.
That's his
of
job,
that.
along with a lot of other things that we get him doing. But we as a board can't do anything about it.
No,
And we as a Conservation Commission don't have any power either. So, we have no teeth. We're
Well,
just
somebody-
advisory.
Yeah.
Okay, item B, other business as required. You have anything, Adam? No. Anybody else?
What's on our agenda for next time, madam, do you know yet?
Site plan.
Site plan?
Yep.
Big one?
Nope. We've seen
You
it.
got something?
I was hoping something like GTE would come in.
Yeah, looking at these new regulations, under HB 413, found it curious that they made a retroactive back to July 1st of 2023.
Yeah, I noticed that too. You're right.
And
I don't know.
change the timeline from 3 years to 7.
Yeah.
That's the Jack Franks law.
Yeah.
Probably. Our good old
That's
friend.
my first thought, but I'm not gonna say it.
Well, I say,
He's sued this board too many times already, and you guys too.
You know,
But it must have something to do with them changing it to 7 years. You have to have a starting date someplace there, so some of them might need to be retroactive to that date. I'm guessing that's why they did that.
That's,
Kind of have to have it, otherwise there's a no man's land. You don't really know
you have to
if
start,
projects
take a look
started
at 24
before
months
that
of
or after
approval,
that.
and it's
I know,
supposed to
but
be
we can't
completed
go
within
back
5 years.
in
They
a
changed it to
zoning,
3 and
from
7.
creating a zoning ordinance.
So instead of having to have
And make it
construction next
retroactive.
July,
No.
Jack Franks can do the.
So how can the state do that?
Because they're the state.
Yeah, they said the same, but they aren't
They
creating
say,
a
former
zoning ordinance.
representative right there, she could tell you how they could do what they want to
They're
do.
extending the protection of the builder from 5 years to 7 years, protection from changes to zoning. So they kind of had to have a starting point for that, I'm guessing,
Yeah, but their effective date is July 1st of this year.
of this year. Is it effective date, but it retroactive back, didn't you say? Went back?
Yeah, back to
Back to
July
2023.
Yeah. So, yeah, the law's date is then, but it starts in 2023, so, yeah, anybody starting in whatever that
Yeah,
look back date was, gets to 7 years.
Yeah, if we approve something back in 2023 and it hasn't been started yet, you know, now
Yeah,
they have, instead of the,
yeah, they have a little bit more time.
Instead of 2025, they have 2026.
But most builders and those people, they don't wanna have the money tied up for very long. Yes, some of them don't start for a while, but usually it's a money thing, and it is tough to get all that financing together to build some of those places, so.
And usually,
Yeah.
usually when they get it through New Hampshire Housing too, they've got a time limit that New Hampshire Housing says you will start by this date. And sometimes they'll look at, I know the guy we're talking about, he had an issue getting bonding, getting financing for the senior housing that he's gonna build. And that, to me, is gonna create another, when he does start building over there, we're gonna have a lot of citizens, I thought we killed that. No,
Well,
we didn't, they
it
just
remains
got
to be
more
seen.
time.
That's for another day.
Yeah.
under this here then, he's automatically renewed this coming year. Because we've extended it back in April for a year.
Right.
Mhm.
Under our town ordinance.
Yeah.
So now, my understanding or interpretation then is that the state is usurped that, and it's guaranteed.
No,
Or-
that's not exactly right. You're talking about two different things there. You're talking about protection from changes to the zoning ordinance for 7 years. If the town changes zoning, we cannot make them go back and do whatever the heck it is. The other thing we're talking about is when does your site plan, approved site plan run out? And yeah, we gave them an extension, but it does not affect that. If the planning board says if it's 2 years, we gave them 2 years, I guess they had a year and another year, then that's it. That has nothing to do with the 7 years. If they haven't started building on there, then they potentially would have to come back all over again.
Okay, so this coming April,
Okay,
he has
yes,
to,
You see what I mean?
yes.
Okay.
so this coming April, he would have, if he hasn't started, he would have to come back and resubmit the entire
The
plan.
whole thing, the whole thing, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I just wanna make sure I understand that.
yeah, it has nothing to do with the 7 years.
It just, he wouldn't have to abide by the new zoning rules if we had any.
Correct, that's all that's for, protection about new zoning, so towns can't,
Well-
yeah. So, no.
If it expires and he has to resubmit, does he have to go by the new, he has to
Yes.
go by the
Which
new
means he
zoning?
can't build it there,
Yes.
He can't build it.
because the new zoning rules won't allow that.
Not that size, right. You wouldn't be able to build it that big.
Just so I'm understanding.
Yep, you've got it. Now you can explain it to us.
Hopefully New Hampshire House will keep dragging his feet on him.
Maybe they will, yeah.
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn by Richard, is there a second? Seconded by Mark, is there any further discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, and we're adjourned.
They're very disciplined.